Some roads don't end on any map. They just keep going, swallowed by fog, salt, ice, and absolute silence. Out there, your GPS dies first. Then the clock stops. Then the radio becomes a doorway. Long-haul truckers know the rule. Keep your eyes on the white line. Don't answer the voice that knows your name. Don't slow down when the same broken-down station wagon appears every 10 miles. And never, ever open the sleeper cab door when the knocking starts from inside your own trailer. These are not campfire tales. These are 5 creepy horror scary stories, pulled from real trucker horror stories, whispered across dead air and abandoned interstates. Tonight, we're opening the most disturbing, true accounts ever transmitted from behind the wheel. Buckle up, check your mirrors. No cell service, no backup, no witnesses. And if you hear the tapping start to match your heartbeat, it's already too late. Story 1. The A9 Road Alistair. Vance was not a man who scared easily. He had been hauling freight across the Scottish Highlands for 32 years, long enough to know that the worst things on the road were drunk tourists, sudden snow, and the kind of loneliness that creeps into the cab after midnight. He had seen collisions, breakdowns, and whiteout conditions that swallowed entire motorways. None of it had ever made him turn back, but the A9 after dark had always unsettled him. The road climbs out of Inverness and cuts through the mountains like a wound that never fully healed. In the summer, it is a postcard. In the winter, it is a trap. And on this particular night, in late October, the fog had come down so thick that Alistair could not see the front of his own hood. The truck was a 40-ton Volvo, one of the newer models with a digital dashboard and satellite navigation. It should have been enough. It should have kept him safe. The load was simple: 22 pallets of bottled water headed for Thurso, a delivery he had made more times than he could count. He had fueled up in Inverness, checked the weather, and decided to push through before the worst of the storm hit. The forecast called for patchy fog. This was not patchy. This was a blanket. This was the kind of fog that erased the world. Alistair drove, with both hands on the wheel, leaning forward in his seat, his eyes locked on the white line at the edge of the asphalt. The wipers swept back and forth, clearing nothing. The headlights only made it worse. Every time he switched to high beams, the light bounced off the mist and turned the windshield into a solid white wall. He switched them back to low and kept his speed under 40 miles per hour. The cab was warm, but the cold was pressing in from outside. It seeped through the door seals and wrapped itself around his ankles. The heater blew steady and dry, filling the small space with the smell of diesel and old coffee. His dispatch tablet glowed softly on its mount, displaying a route that no longer matched the road. The GPS had frozen about 10 miles outside of Pitlochry. The little arrow sat still on the map, as if the truck had stopped moving entirely. But Alistair knew he was still rolling. He could feel the engine humming through the floor and the tires gripping the wet road. He tapped the tablet screen. Nothing. He tapped it again, harder. The display flickered, then went completely black. Alistair frowned. The unit was only 6 months old. It had never failed before, not even in the worst mountain passes. He reached for the power button and held it down. The screen stayed dark. No matter. He knew the road. He knew the turns. He knew where the passing places were, and where the old stone bridges crossed the black water. But the fog made all of that knowledge feel fragile. The road was still there, but it had become something else. It was narrower, darker. The mountains on either side were gone, replaced by a gray void that pressed against the windows like a living thing. Then the ticking started. It was not loud. At first, Alistair thought it was the heater fan or a loose bit of plastic in the dash. The sound was small and mechanical, coming from somewhere deep inside the instrument panel. Tick, tick, tick. 1 tick per second. No faster, no slower. It had the precision of a clock, but the dashboard clock was digital. It made no sound at all. Alistair leaned toward the dash and listened. The ticking seemed to shift, moving from the center console toward the driver's side vent. He tapped the plastic above the gauges with his knuckles. The sound did not stop. It just kept ticking, patient and steady, like a heartbeat made of metal. He tried the radio. The CB unit under the dash crackled to life. Static filled the cab, soft and gray, like the fog outside. Alistair turned the squelch knob, but the static did not break. He heard something underneath it, a low murmur that rose and fell, almost like words spoken from a great distance. He leaned closer to the speaker. The murmur stopped. Then the radio went silent. The fog outside grew heavier. Alistair had driven this road 100 times, but he had never seen it like this. The ancient stone walls that lined the A9 in places were supposed to sit well back from the road. They were old, built by farmers centuries ago to mark the edges of their fields. But now they were closer, much closer. The gray stones loomed out of the fog on both sides, wet and glistening, their surfaces covered in moss that looked black in the headlights. He checked the driver's side mirror. The wall was no more than 3 feet from the side of the cab. That was wrong. That was impossible. The road had narrowed. He was sure of it now. The asphalt had shrunk until it was barely wider than the truck itself. Alistair eased off the accelerator. The engine dropped to a low rumble. The truck rolled forward at walking speed. A soft scraping sound ran along the driver's side of the trailer. It was faint at first, just a whisper of stone against metal. Then it grew louder, a grinding noise that vibrated through the frame and into Alistair's spine. He looked in the mirror again. The wall was right there, inches from the trailer wheels. The gap had vanished. The truck was too wide for the road. He turned the wheel to the right, but there was no room. The wall on the passenger side had moved as well. Both walls now pressed against the truck, like the jaws of a trap. Alistair hit the brakes. The rig shuddered to a stop. The engine idled rough. Outside, the fog was so thick he could not see the road ahead. The stone walls had closed in. They were not walls anymore. They were teeth. The side mirror on the driver's side cracked against a jagged stone. Alistair watched a shard of glass fall away into the fog. He never heard it hit the ground. He killed the engine. The silence was immediate and total. No wind, no birds, no distant rumble of another truck. Just his own breathing, fast and shallow, and the ticking that continued, even with the key turned off. The dashboard was dark. The clock was frozen, but the ticking did not stop. It grew louder. It sounded wet now, like a tongue clicking against teeth. Alistair reached for the door handle. He did not want to get out. Every instinct in his body told him to stay inside the cab, but he had to know. He had to see if the road was still there, if the walls had truly closed in, if the trailer was still attached. He pulled the handle. The door would not open. He tried again. The lock would not budge. It was not stuck. It felt like something on the outside was holding it shut. That was when the tapping started on the back of the trailer. It was not the sound of loose cargo. It was not the wind. It was a soft, deliberate tap, 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 tap. 3 knocks, then a pause. 3 knocks, then a pause. The rhythm matched the ticking from the dashboard. Alistair turned in his seat. The rear window of the cab looked out onto the front of the trailer. He could see nothing but fog, but the tapping continued, moving slowly along the length of the trailer, from the back toward the cab. Tap, tap, tap. Then a second set of taps joined in, and a third. More sounds, lighter and faster now, like fingertips drumming on the metal walls. Dozens of them. They crawled across the roof of the trailer, along the sides, under the frame. The truck began to rock gently, side to side, as if something was shifting its weight on the load bed. Alistair did not move. He could not move. The tapping grew louder. It was not random. It had a pattern, a pulse. It matched his heartbeat. He pressed his hand to his chest. The beats were in perfect sync. Every time his heart thumped, the fingers on the trailer thumped back. He closed his eyes. The sound was everywhere. Inside the cab, inside his skull, inside the stone walls that now pressed against the truck from both sides. He opened his eyes and looked through the cracked side mirror. In the fog he saw shapes, tall, pale shapes standing just beyond the wall. They had no faces. They had no clothing. They just stood there, swaying in the darkness, their long arms raised. One of them stepped forward. It placed both hands on the passenger window. The glass fogged over instantly. A handprint formed, then another, small and white, like frost spreading from the inside. Alistair watched as the prints began to slide down the glass, leaving trails of clear moisture. The shape leaned closer. It had no mouth, but he heard it whisper, not through the air, through the radio. The CB unit crackled to life on its own. A voice, dry as dead leaves, filled the cab. "We know this road." Alistair did not answer. He remembered the old rule. Do not answer. Do not look. Do not open the door. The voice came again, closer now, as if it were sitting in the passenger seat beside him. "You are not the first." The radio went dead. The ticking stopped. For one long second, the fog outside grew still. Then the side mirror on the passenger side shattered inward, spraying glass across the seat. The truck lurched forward as if struck from behind. Alistair grabbed the wheel. The engine started on its own. The headlights blazed to life. The road ahead was gone. He slammed the accelerator. The truck roared and jumped forward. The stone walls scraped down both sides of the cab, sending sparks into the fog. The trailer groaned and bucked. The tapping became a roar, a frantic drumming on every inch of metal. Alistair did not slow down. He did not look back. He drove blind through the white, with the wheel shaking in his hands, and the windshield cracking under the pressure of the fog. Then the road returned. The fog thinned. The walls fell back. The sky above the mountains turned a pale shade of gray just before dawn. Alistair let the truck roll to a stop on a straight stretch of asphalt. His hands were bleeding. His mirror was gone. The trailer was dented and scratched, but it was still there. The GPS screen blinked once, then lit up. The map showed him 30 miles north of where he should have been. The clock read 6:42 a.m. He sat there until the sun came up. He did not turn on the radio. He did not get out to inspect the damage. He just stared at the road behind him, waiting to see if the pale shapes would follow. They never did, but the ticking never returned either, and Alistair Vance never drove the A9 after dark again. Some truckers say the old road still remembers him. They say if you break down on that stretch, just before the fog rolls in, you can hear a sound coming from under your dashboard, a small, patient ticking, and if you listen close enough, you will hear something else, the soft, wet tapping of pale hands on the back of your trailer, keeping time with your own heart. That is story 1. Story 2. The Salt Flats. Lou Brody Miller had been running I-80 for over a decade, but the Bonneville Salt Flats always made him feel like he was driving on another planet. There were no landmarks, no billboards, no gas stations, no trees, just a blinding white crust stretching from horizon to horizon. Glowing under a huge silver moon, it was the flattest place on Earth. And at night, it became a kind of infinite white room, with no walls and no exit. He was hauling a reefer full of frozen food from Wendover to Salt Lake City. The load was heavy, but the truck handled smooth. He set the cruise control at 70 and let the straight road pull him west. The radio played an old classic rock station out of Tuel, but the signal started to fade about 20 miles past the Nevada border. Static crept in, then swallowed the music whole. The first time he saw the station wagon, he did not think much of it. It sat on the right shoulder, an old green 1970s station wagon with rust around the wheel wells and a cracked windshield. The hood was open, the rear hatch was closed. There was no one standing outside, no hazard lights, no emergency triangle, just a dead car in the middle of nowhere. Brody slowed out of instinct, but he did not stop. In the Salt Flats, stopping for a stranger was a gamble. He had heard too many trucker horror stories about good Samaritans who never made it home. He passed the wagon and watched it shrink in his mirror. The moon lit it up like a pale green shell. He noted the missing rear hubcap and the long scratch along the driver's side door. Then he looked away and forgot about it. 10 minutes later, it was there again. Brody's brain registered the same details before he fully understood what he was seeing. Same green paint, same rust, same missing hubcap, same cracked windshield. The hood was still up. The same scratch ran down the driver's side door. He glanced at the odometer. It read 114 on 327 miles. He had not looked at it before, but the number seemed frozen. He tapped the glass. It did not change. The station wagon passed behind him and disappeared into the moonlit white. Brody told himself it was a coincidence, a prank. Maybe a local had towed the same car farther down the road to mess with truckers, but there were no tire tracks on the shoulder, no tow truck, no footprints in the salt, just the same car, waiting. The third time it appeared, Brody checked the clock. It read 3:14 a.m. He had not checked it before, but now he was sure it had not moved. He stared at the glowing green digits. They did not blink. They did not advance. He tapped the dashboard, then tapped the clock itself. The numbers stayed frozen. The moon outside had not moved either. The stars had not shifted. The road looked identical to the road he had already driven. He keyed the CB radio. His voice came out dry and low. "Anyone on I-80 west of Salt Lake? This is Brody Miller. I just passed the same broken down wagon 3 times. Can anybody hear me?" The speaker hissed. No voice answered. He turned the squelch knob. Static filled the cab. But underneath it, he heard something else. A slow rhythmic hum. It sounded like breathing through a long metal pipe. He snapped the radio off. The hum continued for a second after the power died, then faded. The fourth time he saw the station wagon, it had moved closer to the road. Its left tires now sat on the white line. The driver's side door was still closed, but the passenger window was rolled down. A pale hand hung out, fingers limp, skin glowing under the moon. The hand did not move. Brody's headlights washed over it, and for a split second, he thought the fingers curled. He could not be sure. He was past it too fast. He pressed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed to 80. The road did not change. The white salt stretched on forever. He could not tell if he was moving faster or if the landscape was simply repeating itself faster. The station wagon appeared again exactly 10 minutes later, but now it was in the middle of the right lane. Brody swerved left. The truck crossed the center line and rumbled over the rumble strip. The station wagon sat perfectly still, headlights off, driver's side door wide open. He looked in the side mirror as he passed. The open door swung slowly back and forth. There was no one inside. There was no one outside. The mirror went dark, as if someone had placed a hand over it. He turned the wheel back into his lane. The road was straight. The moon was bright. The truck hummed along at 80 miles per hour, but the mirror stayed dark. The entire world behind him had vanished. He could not see the trailer. He could not see the salt. There was only blackness pressing against the rear window. It was not fog. It was not night. It was a void. Brody slammed the brake pedal. The truck did not slow. The pedal dropped to the floor, but the speedometer stayed at 80. He tried the cruise control. It would not disengage. He pulled the gear shift into neutral. The lever would not move. The engine did not rev, did not strain. It just kept pulling forward. The fuel gauge caught his eye. It read empty, below empty. The needle was buried past the red line. He had filled the tanks in Wendover. He had enough diesel for 300 miles, but the gauge said 0. The low fuel light was not on. The engine was not sputtering. The truck was not slowing. It was running on nothing. The 5th time he saw the station wagon, it was facing him. The old green car sat dead ahead in the center of the road. Its front bumper pointed straight at his grill. Its headlights were on now, but they were wrong. Too pale, too close together. They did not look like headlights. They looked like eyes. Brody screamed and wrenched the wheel hard to the right. The truck left the asphalt and crashed onto the salt flats. The surface held for half a second. Then it cracked. The front tires broke through the crust. The truck dropped forward. Brody's body slammed against the seatbelt. The headlights pointed down into the white. Beneath the surface, there was no ground. There was only a vast, glowing emptiness. And in that emptiness, something moved. A pale shape, enormous and long, gliding under the salt like a leviathan under ice. It had no face. It had no eyes, but it knew he was there. It turned toward the truck. Brody's engine died. The dashboard went black. The station wagon was gone. The road was gone. The last thing he saw before the salt swallowed the cab was the fuel gauge needle twitching once, then snapping past empty. The engine did not restart, but in the silence, he heard the breathing again. It was not from the cab, it was from below. Then the clock blinked. It read 3:15 a.m. Brody gasped. He was sitting in his seat, both hands on the wheel. The truck was on the road. The engine idled. The headlights were on. The station wagon sat on the shoulder ahead. The moon hung exactly where it had been. The odometer read 114,327 miles. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands were shaking. He looked in the mirror. The man staring back had white salt crusted in his hair and a smear of black oil across his face. He did not remember getting out of the truck. He did not remember coming back. He reached for the radio. His hand froze before he touched the power button. He could still hear the breathing. It was very faint now, but it was inside the cab with him, under the seat, under the floor, under the salt. He looked out the window. The station wagon was still there. The clock was still 3:14 a.m. The fuel gauge still read empty. The road still ran straight into the white. Brody Miller did not turn off the engine. He did not try to brake. He just kept driving. The station wagon appeared every 10 minutes. The moon never set. The clock never moved. The pale shapes under the salt kept pace with him, gliding just below the crust, and the breathing never stopped. If you ever drive I-80 across the Bonneville Salt Flats at night, and you see a green 1970s station wagon on the shoulder, do not slow down. Do not look at the salt. Do not check your fuel gauge. And whatever you do not let the clock reach 3:14 a.m. Because some drivers never reach Salt Lake City. They just keep driving that straight white line, passing the same dead wagon every 10 minutes, while something enormous and patient glides beneath the salt waiting for the road to crack. That is story 2. Story 3. The Ice Rode Wyatt. Dubois had learned to fear the ice more than any animal, any storm, or any man. The Northwest Territories did not forgive mistakes. On the winter road, the only thing between a driver and a black, freezing grave was 3 feet of frozen lake surface. One wrong move, one moment of panic, and the lake would open its mouth and swallow 40 tons of steel without a sound. Wyatt had been hauling diesel to remote exploration camps for 6 winters. He knew every pressure ridge, every whiteout, every weak spot between the tree line and the far shore. He knew the rules better than most. Never stop on the ice. Never drive too fast. Never ignore the sound of the lake waking up beneath your wheels. That night, the ice was talking. Boom! The sound came from deep under the truck. It rolled through the frozen surface like distant thunder. The cab vibrated. The dashboard rattled. The coffee in his thermos sloshed against the lid. Wyatt tightened his grip on the steering wheel and checked his mirrors. Behind him, the trailer lights glowed red against a wall of blowing snow. The road was a narrow white scar cut across a black void. There were no trees out here, no landmarks, no light except the moon reflecting off the endless frozen surface. He had made this run more times than he could count. Tonight felt wrong. The temperature had dropped to 40 below. The heater in the cab blew warm air over his face, but the cold pressed in from every window. Frost had already begun to crawl across the passenger side glass, forming feathery patterns that looked like long, thin fingers. The radio hissed with static. There was no music this far north, no cell towers, no GPS. Only the CB, crackling with the distant voices of other ice road truckers who were too far away to help. A voice cut through the static. It was faint and broken. Dubois, you copy? How's the road ahead? Wyatt keyed the mic. It was another driver, an older man named Callahan, who ran supplies to the same camps. Solid so far, he said. Pressure cracks near the east inlet. Nothing major. Callahan's voice came back, slower now. Stay sharp past the old pressure ridge. Something's been moving out there. Wyatt frowned. What do you mean? Moving. The radio went silent. Only the wind howled outside. He tried calling again, but the channel was dead. Callahan did not answer. Then the thermal screen flickered. The truck had a forward-looking infrared camera mounted above the driver's side mirror. It was meant to spot caribou on the road and black ice hidden under the snow. The display glowed a pale blue-gray, showing the world in ghostly outlines. The road ahead appeared as a faint ribbon. The frozen lake stretched out like a gray void. The trees on the far shore were barely visible. And beneath the ice, something hot was moving. Wyatt leaned toward the screen. At first he thought it was a glitch. The camera sometimes picked up pockets of warmer water moving under the surface, but this was not water. It was too large, too solid, too deliberate. A massive heat signature had appeared directly under the road, below his truck. It was enormous, easily the size of a moose, but it moved with a smooth, purposeful rhythm. It was not drifting. It was walking, keeping perfect pace with the truck. Wyatt's foot eased off the accelerator. The truck slowed. The heat signature slowed with it. He pressed the pedal again. The truck sped up. The shape beneath the ice sped up, matching him exactly. He could see it on the screen, a sprawling orange shape against the deep blue ice. It had no clear outline. It looked like a man, but too long in the arms, too wide in the chest. The head was small, slumped forward. The legs were too thin. It was looking up at him. The first heavy crack split the ice ahead. A jagged line shot across the road surface, black and wet. Water welled up from the fracture and spread across the snow. The truck jolted. The trailer fishtailed slightly. Wyatt steered into the skid, his heart slamming against his ribs. The ice had been solid an hour ago. The road was inspected every day. It should have held, but the thing beneath him was moving faster now, and the ice was weakening with every step it took. He grabbed the radio. His voice came out hoarse and half-frozen. "Anybody on Tibbet Crossing? This is Wyatt Dubois. I've got something under the ice. I need a position check." The speaker crackled. For a long moment, there was only the wind outside. Then a voice came through, far away and thin. It did not sound like Callahan. It sounded like a child. "Wyatt, I can hear you breathing." He froze. The voice was not coming from the speaker. It was coming from the passenger side of the cab. The CB had gone silent, but the words continued, soft and close, like a whisper pressed against his ear. "You are so warm." The heater on the dashboard clicked. Then it reversed. Instead of blowing hot air, it poured freezing wind into the cab. The temperature dropped instantly. Wyatt's breath turned to white clouds. The windshield fogged over, then began to freeze from the inside. He reached for the heater controls. The dials would not move. The vents screamed with cold air. His fingers went numb. His eyelashes frosted. The thermal screen flickered and went dark. Then the scratching started. It came from the passenger side window, not from outside. From inside, an invisible nail dragged across the glass. Slow and deliberate, it carved a line through the frost, then another, then a curve. Letters began to form. Let the word appeared in the frost, written from the inside of the glass. Wyatt stared, his breath short and ragged. The scratching continued, high and shrill. The third letter came, then the fourth. His hand moved toward the gear shift. The truck was still rolling. The ice was still cracking. The cold was eating through his coat. In the word finished, the invisible hand paused, as if waiting for him to read it. Then it wrote the next word, faster now, the letters jagged and wrong. Wyatt did not wait for the rest. He stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward. The ice boomed beneath him. The voice in his ear turned sharp and hungry. Cold, the final word clawed itself across the glass. The frost turned black at the edges. The cold in the cab became unbearable. Wyatt's teeth chattered so hard, he thought his jaw would break. The steering wheel burned his bare palms. The diesel engine whined, struggling against the thickening fuel. But the truck moved. It gained speed. The heat signature under the ice was no longer just following. It was racing ahead, matching his pace, and then pulling out in front. The cracks on the road multiplied. Chunks of ice flipped into the air. Water sprayed against the undercarriage and froze instantly on the metal. The shore was close. He could see the dark line of spruce trees through the blowing snow. 50 yards. 40. The ice behind him exploded. A huge white arm shot up through the road surface, right behind the trailer. It was pale and thick, with long fingers that flexed and clawed at the snow. A second arm burst through beside it. The lake opened like a mouth. The trailer dropped. Wyatt saw the rear wheels sink into black water. The truck tilted backward. The engine screamed. The thermal screen flickered back on. And for 1 second, he saw the full shape beneath him. It was not walking anymore. It was climbing. He downshifted and floored the accelerator. The front tires bit into the packed snow. The truck fought against the weight. The trailer hitch groaned. The ice broke away in huge sheets. The arms reached higher, slapping against the rear doors of the trailer. He heard the metal buckle like tinfoil. Then the front tires hit the shore. The truck surged onto solid ground. The trailer pulled free from the water with a sound like tearing steel. The rear wheels spun, caught, and dragged the rig forward into the trees. Wyatt drove until the forest closed around the road. Then he killed the engine. The silence was absolute. The cold still poured from the vents. The windshield was a sheet of ice, but the words were still there, faint and waiting. "Let me in, it's cold." He did not open the door. He did not turn around. He sat in the cab with his arms wrapped around his chest, shivering, watching the dark line of the lake through the cracked side mirror. On the ice, something stood at the edge of the water. It was pale and naked, shaped like a man but too tall, its arms hanging past its knees. It did not move. It did not speak. It just watched the truck. Wyatt stayed there until the sun came up. By morning, the thing was gone. The road behind him was gone. The lake had swallowed it whole. He radioed for help, but no one answered. Later, a rescue crew found him sitting in the cab, still shivering, still staring at the frozen words on his windshield. He told them what he saw. They told him it was frostbite and fatigue. They told him there was no road where he described, but Wyatt knew the truth. The ice remembers heat, and sometimes heat wakes things that should never be awake. Now, every winter, when the temperature drops to 40 below and the lake begins to boom, Wyatt Dubois refuses to drive the ice roads after dark. He will not explain why. He only says one thing. If you ever see a heat signature under your truck, do not slow down. And if the cold starts talking, do not answer it, because the cold is not empty. It is waiting. Story 4. The Long Beach Freeway. Mateo Ruiz had been driving the I-710 after dark for 8 years, and he had learned one hard rule about the Long Beach Freeway. Never trust the silence. During the day, the 710 was a grinding river of container trucks, port traffic, and heat rising off the oil-stained pavement. The air smelled like diesel, salt water, and wet concrete. Horns blared, brakes squealed, tires hammered over cracked expansion joints. It was ugly, loud, and alive. But after midnight, the freeway changed. The warehouses went dark. The cranes at the port of Long Beach stopped moving. The container yard lights buzzed like dying insects, and the road stretched north into the industrial heart of Los Angeles, like a concrete vein that had been drained of blood. Mateo was hauling a flatbed loaded with steel beams from the port to a distribution yard near Vernon. The load was heavy but secure, chained down with thick binders and edge protectors. His truck was a Peterbilt 389, old but solid, with a rebuilt engine and a new security system that fed 4 camera angles to a small screen mounted on the dash. The route was simple. Head north on I-710, past the refineries, exit at Willow Street, then cut east through the commercial district. He had done it more times than he could count. But tonight, the road felt wrong before he even reached the on-ramp. The first thing Mateo noticed was the lack of traffic. At 1:47 a.m., there should have been a few late-shift port drivers, maybe a produce truck heading north, maybe a Caltrans sweeper working the shoulder. Instead, the freeway was empty. No headlights in his mirrors, no taillights ahead, just the orange sodium streetlights, reflecting off the lanes in pools of dirty light. The second thing was the radio. His CB crackled to life as soon as he merged onto the freeway. The sound was low and steady, a wash of static that rose and fell like slow breathing. Mateo reached down and turned the squelch knob. It did not help. The static remained, soft and gray, filling the cab with white noise. He switched the radio off. The static continued for a second after the power died, then stopped. The third thing was the overpass. He had been driving, for about 10 minutes when his air brakes suddenly locked up. The truck let out a high-pitched pneumatic hiss and slammed to a stop directly beneath the Artesia Boulevard overpass. Matteo was thrown forward against his seatbelt. The engine stalled, the trailer skidded, and then sat still, the heavy chains rattling against the steel beams. The smell of hot brake dust poured through the vents. He cursed and tried the ignition. Nothing. He turned the key again. The engine did not crank. The dash lights flickered once, then went dark. The headlights cut out. The only light came from the street lamps above the road, a dull orange glow that bled through the windshield and painted his face in amber. For a long moment, everything was quiet. Then he looked at the security camera screen. The cameras were still on, running off the battery backup. The feed was grainy and gray, but he could see the flatbed behind the cab. The 4 angles showed the same thing. His cargo sat motionless under the overpass. The lane markers were empty. The concrete walls were stained black with years of exhaust. Then one of the cameras moved. Not the camera itself. Something in the frame shifted. A dark shape peeled away from the overpass column and stepped into the edge of the road. It stood on 2 legs, but it was too thin, too long in the arms. It had no face, just a smooth patch of shadow where the features should have been. Matteo leaned closer to the screen. Another shape appeared, then another. They came from behind the columns, from the drainage culverts, from the cracks in the concrete. They moved without sound, their limbs jerking in short, unnatural bursts, like insects caught in bad stop motion. The first one reached the flatbed. It did not climb. It simply flowed upward, like a spill of black ink running in reverse. Within seconds, it was standing on top of the steel beams. The others followed, pouring onto the trailer in complete silence. Matteo grabbed the CB mic and keyed the button. Mayday, Mayday. This is Matteo Ruiz on I-710 under Artesia. My truck is dead. Something is on my trailer. I need help now. The radio popped. A voice filled the cab. It was not a dispatcher. It was a recording. This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. The voice was old and distorted, as if it had been recorded decades ago and played too many times. It sounded like a woman's voice, but stretched thin. A major earthquake has occurred in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Damage is severe. Transportation corridors are closed. Do not attempt to use the freeway system. Matteo stared at the radio. The small digital screen was dark, but the recording kept playing. The words were wrong. The cadence was too slow. The voice sounded like it was reading from a script that had been soaked in water. If you are hearing this message, you are still on the road. You must remain in your vehicle. Do not leave your vehicle. They are on the road. They are under the road. They are already here. The voice stopped. Then it started again from the beginning. This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. The loop repeated, the same words, the same tone. The date stamp on the radio's small screen flickered once, then read 07021992. Matteo's thumb pressed the transmit button again. He tried to interrupt the recording, but the radio would not switch channels. The voice would not stop. It just kept playing, over and over, while the shadows on the flatbed grew still. He looked at the security camera screen again. The flatbed was black. The shadow figures were packed onto the steel beams, their bodies merging and separating like oil on water. They were not moving anymore. They were facing the cab. Then the first streetlight above the overpass exploded. It did not flicker. It burst. Glass rained down onto the road. The second light died a second later, then the third. They went out one by one, moving down the freeway toward the truck. The darkness was crawling toward him. And in that darkness, the shapes grew taller. Matteo reached for the door handle. The electric lock clicked. The door would not open. He pulled harder. It did not budge. The passenger side door clicked too. The windows would not roll down. The sleeper curtain behind the seat hung still. The cab was closing in around him. The screen showed the last remaining streetlight. It was directly above the cab. The glow was weak and red, like a dying bulb. He watched the shadows gather beneath it. They had no eyes, but he could feel them watching. The light popped. Total darkness. The cab went black, except for the faint green glow of the security screen and the red numbers on the radio. The screen showed the cameras still feeding, but the images had changed. The flatbed was empty. The street behind was empty. No shapes, no movement, just the overpass, the concrete, and the burned-out streetlights. Then the camera angle flicked to the rear view. Something was standing directly behind the trailer. It was not a shadow. It was a figure made of static. Its body was tall and thin, like a man made of bad signal. It twitched and blurred, its edges shifting like noise on an old television. It raised one long arm and pointed at the camera. The radio recording stopped. For 1 second, the cab was silent. A new voice came through the speaker. It was not the woman. It was low and wet, like a mouth pressed against the mic. 1992. Matteo did not answer. He sat still, his hands shaking, his breath shallow. The security screen flickered. The static figure was gone. The street lights were still dead. The overpass above him creaked, low and heavy, as if something was crawling across it. Then the engine started on its own. The headlights blazed to life. The dashboard lit up. The radio snapped off. The truck jolted forward without Matteo touching the accelerator. The transmission clunked into gear. The wheels turned. The trailer pulled free of the overpass with a deep groaning sound. Matteo grabbed the wheel, but the truck was already accelerating. The speedometer climbed. The freeway blurred past. The streetlights were back on now, but they were different. They were not orange. They were pale white, almost blue, and they flickered as the truck passed beneath them. He looked in the mirror. The flatbed was empty. The steel beams were still there, but the chains were loose and dragging. The rear camera showed the overpass shrinking behind him. On the road, where the truck had stopped, there was a ring of black shapes standing in a circle around a burned patch of asphalt. Then the radio turned on one more time. The woman's voice filled the cab, calm and empty. Do not stop at the next overpass. Matteo did not stop. He did not exit. He drove all the way to the yard in silence, his foot never leaving the floor. When he finally parked and shut the truck down, the sun was just starting to rise over the industrial skyline. The radio screen was dark. The security cameras were dead. The trailer was covered in a fine black dust that smelled like burned rubber and old blood. He told the yard manager he had hit a bird strike. He told himself it was a mechanical failure, a bad relay, a prank with the radio, but he knew it was not. That night, he checked the truck. The air brake lines were intact. The battery was fine. The security system showed no recorded footage from the time under the overpass, but under the driver's side floor mat, he found a small patch of black residue. It was cold to the touch. It would not wash off his hands. A week later, he was driving the same route when his CB crackled. The woman's voice came through, soft and broken. This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Matteo turned the radio off. He did not slow down. He did not look at the overpass, and he never drove the I-710 after midnight again. Now some drivers say the Long Beach Freeway has a dead zone beneath the old Artesia overpass. If your air brakes lock up there, you will not hear the police on your radio. You will hear a woman reading an emergency alert from 1992. And if you look in your security camera, you will see the shadows already waiting on your flatbed. Do not get out. Do not answer the voice. And do not let the last street light go out. Because once the light dies, the road is not yours anymore. That is story 4. Story 5. The Nullarbor Plain Jace. Garrett was not afraid of the dark. Most men who drive the air highway after midnight learn to fear it. The Nullarbor Plain is not a place that welcomes travelers. It is a place that tolerates them for as long as the fuel holds out, and then it forgets them. The road runs straight and flat through the dead heart of Australia for over 1,000 kilometers, and there is nothing out there. No trees, no water, no shelter, no mercy. Jace had been running long-haul freight across the Nullarbor for 11 years. He had driven through dust storms, heat waves, and nights so black the headlights seemed to stop at the front bumper. He had seen dead kangaroos, blown tires, and the occasional stranded tourist, but he had never once been afraid of the road itself. That changed on the night he saw the hitchhiker. The run had started like any other. He left Seduna just before sundown, hauling a triple road train loaded with mining equipment bound for Norseman. The truck was a Kenworth, old but solid, with a sleeper cab and a bull bar that had seen better days. The trailers stretched out behind him, red with dust and rattling under their heavy chains. The fuel tanks were full. The CB radio was quiet. The road ahead was empty. The Nullarbor has a way of erasing everything. The horizon disappears. The sky swallows the land. The only thing left is the white center line and the constant hum of the engine. After a few hours, your brain stops seeing the world as a place. It becomes a sound, a vibration, a long, unbroken line stretching into nothing. Jace had learned to manage the fatigue. He drank cold coffee. He chewed gum. He slapped his own face until his eyes stayed open. But every driver knows there's a point where the road starts to dream for you. The first time he saw the figure, he thought it was a mirage. It stood on the left shoulder, just inside the reach of his headlights. A dark shape against the darker plain. Jace slowed out of habit, then caught himself. There was no town out here, no roadhouse, no reason for anyone to be standing on the side of the air highway in the middle of the night. The figure held a sign. It was white with black letters. The words read, "Next stop." Jace frowned. The next stop was over 200 kilometers away. No one walked that far, not in the dark, not without water. He checked the mirrors. The road behind was empty. The road ahead was empty. The figure did not move. It just stood there, holding the sign with both hands, its face hidden in shadow. He passed it and did not stop. 50 kilometers later, the same figure appeared again. Same coat, same sign, same words. Next stop. But this time it was closer to the road. Its boots were touching the edge of the asphalt. Jace leaned forward in his seat. The headlights caught the figure full in the face, but there was no face to see. The head was smooth, pale and blank, like a mannequin left out in the salt air. He looked away and told himself it was a different person. It had to be. The Nullarbor played tricks. The heat during the day and the cold at night could bend the light and make the brain see things that were not there. But he knew what he had seen. The third time the figure appeared, it was standing on the white line. Jace's foot came off the accelerator. The road train slowed to 90. The figure was close now, close enough that he could see the way its fingers curled around the edges of the sign. The cardboard was old and stained. The letters were not painted. They were cut into the surface, jagged and deep, as if someone had scratched them with a broken bottle. The sign had changed. It now read, "You are close." Jace felt a cold spike move through his chest. He pressed the accelerator. The engine roared. The truck surged forward, and the figure slid past the driver's side window. He did not hear sound. No voice, no footsteps, just the rush of wind and the rattle of the trailers. He checked the mirror. The figure was gone. For the next 30 minutes, the road stayed empty. Jace tried the radio. The CB crackled with static. He turned the squelch knob. A voice broke through, thin and distant, like a signal bouncing off the ionosphere. "Anyone on the air? This is Roadhouse Norseman. Is there a trucker near Madura Pass?" Jace grabbed the mic. His voice came out dry. "This is Garbo. I'm about 100 clicks east of Madura. What do you need?" The radio hissed. The voice came back, but it was not the Roadhouse anymore. It was softer now, younger. It sounded like a child standing in a long metal hallway. "You should have stopped." Jace froze. The mic slipped in his hand. The static swelled, then died. The channel went silent. He switched to the emergency frequency. Nothing. He switched back. The radio was dead. The fourth time the figure appeared, it was standing in the middle of the road. Jace slammed the brakes. The road train screamed. Air brakes hissed. The trailers bucked and fishtailed behind him. The figure did not move. It stood directly in the left lane, holding the sign with one hand. The other hand was raised, palm out, as if telling him to wait. The sign now read, "I know your name." Jace killed the high beams. The figure tilted its head. The movement was wrong. It was too slow, too smooth. Like a bird watching prey through a cage, the coat it wore was dark green and wet, clinging to its body like a second skin. The hands were pale and long, with too many joints in the fingers. Jace hit the horn. The sound blared across the empty plain. The figure did not flinch. It took a step forward. The engine began to sputter. The fuel gauge dropped from half to empty. The temperature warning light flashed red. The dashboard lights flickered. The headlights dimmed to a dull orange glow. The figure took another step. Its feet made no sound on the asphalt. Jace grabbed the CB mic again. His voice cracked. "Mayday. This is Garbo on the air highway. I have a pedestrian in the road. I need help now." The radio clicked. A voice came through, dry as dust and heavy with static. "No one is coming." The figure took another step. Its jaw unhinged. A long, wet shriek poured out of it, not from its mouth, but from everywhere at once. The sound filled the cab, the trailers, the sky. The windshield cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The headlights exploded into black glass. Jace stomped the accelerator. The engine caught, coughed, and roared back to life. The truck lunged forward. The figure vanished into the grill. There was no impact, no thud, just a sudden, crushing silence. The road ahead was empty. Jace drove at 120 kilometers per hour, his heart pounding, his hands shaking on the wheel. The fuel gauge had returned to half. The temperature light was off. The windshield was still cracked, but the cracks were thin and clean, like old scars. He did not look in the mirrors. He did not touch the radio. He did not stop. The Nullarbor stretched on, flat and black and endless. The stars pressed down like cold pinpricks. The road hummed beneath the tires. For a long while, there was only the engine and the wind and the steady rhythm of his own breathing. Then he heard the thud. It came from above the cab, a heavy, wet sound, like a body landing on a canvas tarp. The roof of the sleeper cab dented inward. The headliner bulged. Jace looked up. Something was on top of the truck. The wind shrieked outside, but the thing did not blow off. It settled onto the roof with a wet, squelching sound, like raw meat slapping against metal. Then it began to move. Jace grabbed the wheel with both hands. He could hear it crawling, slow, deliberate, dragging itself from the back of the cab toward the windshield. The metal creaked under its weight. Droplets of something dark began to run down the outside of the glass. They were not water, they were black and thick, and they moved against the wind. He swerved hard to the left. The road train fishtailed. The thing on the roof held on. It did not slide. It did not let go. It just kept crawling, one wet hand at a time. The driver's side window fogged from the inside. A new word appeared in the condensation, drawn by an invisible finger. "Garbo," he screamed. The truck swerved back onto the road. The trailers whipped behind him, their tires riding the edge of the shoulder. The thing on the roof slammed against the cab, and for the first time he heard its voice. It was not a scream. It was a whisper, right against the roof, so close it seemed to come from inside his own skull. "You should have stopped." Jace did not stop. He drove through the night with the thing on the roof, its wet fingers tapping on the windshield, its body pressing down on the cab like a great weight. The engine sputtered and coughed. The headlights dimmed. The road began to narrow. The tapping matched his heartbeat. Every thump in his chest echoed above him. The black liquid on the glass spread until the windshield was almost completely covered. He could not see the road. He could only feel the wheels on the asphalt, and the weight above him growing heavier. Then the sun came up. The first light broke over the horizon, red and angry. The weight on the roof lifted. The tapping stopped. The black liquid on the windshield dried to a fine gray dust and blew away. The road reappeared, straight and empty. Jace kept driving until he reached Norseman. When he finally pulled into the roadhouse, he could barely stand. His hands were cramped. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His voice was gone. The road train was covered in red dust and long scratches. The roof of the sleeper cab was caved in, as if something heavy had been sitting on it for hours. The mechanic said it looked like a tree branch had fallen on the cab, but there were no trees on the Nullarbor. Jace did not tell them about the hitchhiker. He did not tell them about the sign. He parked the truck behind the roadhouse and slept in the diner until dark. Then he quit the long-haul route and took a job running local freight in Perth. But sometimes, late at night, he still wakes up to the sound of something heavy landing on the roof of his house. He lies still and listens, and in the silence, he hears it whisper, "You should have stopped. The Nullarbor has no trees, no bends, and no mercy." If you ever drive the air highway at night and you see a lone hitchhiker holding a sign that reads, "Next stop," do not slow down, do not stop. And if you hear a wet thud on the roof of your cab, do not look up, because that hitchhiker is not asking for a ride. It is asking for you. That is story 5. The highway is dark now. The radio is quiet, but somewhere out there, a trucker is still driving, and the road is not as empty as it seems. These 5 true trucker horror stories are only the beginning. There are more voices in the static, more faces in the fog, more things waiting under the ice and moving through the salt flats. If you made it this far, you already know the rules. Keep your doors locked, keep your engine running, and never answer a voice you do not recognize. Subscribe to Mr. Whisper's Official so you never miss another trucker horror story. We release new true trucker stories. Like this video if the Nullarbor hitchhiker made your skin crawl. Comment below and tell us which story disturbed you the most. Was it the A9 road, the frozen lake, or the Long Beach Freeway? share this video with a driver you know, because someone out there is on the midnight run right now, and they need to hear what happens next. Drive safe, stay awake, and never ignore the tapping on your trailer